Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of Talkin Lost, the recap show where Luke and myself are going to be breaking down every episode of the hit TV show Lost for its 20-year anniversary. It is September 1st, 2024. While the show did not premiere exactly on this date 20 years ago, it is the month of the 20-year anniversary. And so now, similar to what Professor Pat and I did about 2 years ago with Talkin Thrones, now Luke and I are going to do with Lost, the TV show. Luke, are you excited to begin this endeavor? Because it's going to be a long one, to say the least.
I am very excited. I think it matches up with my master's degree. So when we finish this, I may have finished my master's, started and finished my master's degree as well. I'm mainly here just for you to have someone to talk to, as I have not seen this show, so I'm offering a different perspective. So it should be quite the endeavor.
You're going to have 2 master's degrees when you're done with this. You're going to have your regular master's degrees, and you're going to have your master's degree in Lost.
Well, what can be better than that?
Exactly. I personally don't see the value of not having one versus the other. Welcome to the show, people. This is Talkin Lost. See how many times I can play that before I get pulled down for copyright strikes. All right, people. So we're here to talk about Lost, the show that I have often talked about in the past. Chris has talked about it on the show before. Chris and I covered it all the way back in 2020 as for his birthday episode, as Lost is Chris's self-admitted favorite show of all time. This is famously the show that was on network TV, developed by Damon Lindelof and what's it called, Nick Cuse, as well as J.J. Abrams, who came in and directed this 2-part pilot as well. The general premise, for those who have not seen it, is about a bunch of people who get in a plane crash, wind up stranded in the middle of a desert island, and while the process of trying to get rescued, discover that there may be a lot more to this island than they discovered. So, Luke, as somebody who has never seen the show before, but obviously has heard a lot about it through, kind of our circles on the internet, and obviously through the grapevine, as this is one of the earliest shows to promote an online internet discussion. What were your thoughts after having seen the pilot for the first time?
Well, I knew that it was this mega thing back in the day. My mom's even seen it somewhat recently. So I don't really know anything about it. I know like a very few vague things, some things you've put in the show doc, and I know that people don't love the ending, but from what I've heard, it's like the mystery the answers could never live up to the mystery. But in this first pilot, it's only the pilot, so not much has happened, but I'm in. Like, there's enough intrigue there, so they've done that job.
Yeah, Lindelof, obviously, this is not the first show this is not obviously the only show that he's done. He contributed The Leftovers and Watchmen, both to HBO, both of which I thought were absolutely spectacular. I have 1 season left of The Leftovers. I watched all of Watchmen in real time. Really, really enjoyed those. But this was really like his first, like, kind of big claim to fame. I have that somewhere. I have this in the backstory, obviously, of the show, that the show was initially conceived by Lloyd Braun, who was the head of ABC at the time, while on a vacation in Hawaii, as a TV adaptation of Castaway, Crossword Survivor. He pitches the ideas at the network executive gathering at Disney's Grand California Hotel and Spa. Senior VP Tom Sherman saw potential and ordered an initial script from Spelling Television. Spelling producer Ted Gold had writer Jeff Lieber pitch to ABC, the pitch being called Nowhere. And then, unhappy with the script and subsequent rewrites, Braun contacted J.J. Abrams, who'd already developed Alias for ABC and also Felicity in the past, in order to write a new script, but Lieber would still gain credit for the pilot, as well as a created by credit through binding arbitration via the Writers Guild. And the one inviolable edit was that the title was to remain Lost. Abrams warmed to the idea if the series would have a supernatural element and if he would have a writing partner. And then in comes ABC executive Heather Kadin, who introduces him to Damon Lindelof, who at the time had been writing for shows like Nash Bridges and Crossing Jordan. And the big thing, and Chris has told me about this in the past, the big thing that really like kind of where this connects is that JJ and Lindelof both respectively connected over their love of Star Wars, specifically this one Star Wars character, I can't remember who. Basically, the two of them sat down, they created the show's characters and style, and they basically conceived a series Bible detailing major story points and mythology ideas for about a 45-season show run inspired by Babylon 5. The big thing now here, too, this is the big thing that's crucially important, is the network did not want this show to be serialized. They did not want it to be like, okay, you have to watch every episode. They wanted it to be much more standalone and procedural-esque. That was a big thing that they did not want after what happened with Alias, where Alias...
Well, that was a big thing in like the 2000s, right? That's
Yes.
the explosion of the procedural.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Your,
Well,
your,
not even just...
your house and
Yes.
whatnot.
And that's part of the point as well, is the fact that by the time Lost premiered, so Lost premieres in 2004, right? This is kind of after the big cable boom of the early 2000s, you know, when Sopranos and The Wire, and then you get shows like Deadwood or Dominated. You know, 24 and The Shield had already premiered. You know, you're 1 year out from the big sitcom boom of 2005, which is when you had The Office and Parks and Rec. House also premieres this year. It's basically the year where the cable channels are trying to basically fight back again. The network channels are trying to fight back against kind of the cable boom. You know, they're trying to put a little bit more money into their shows. They're trying to not just make them like standalone procedural, case of the week. You know, they're trying to basically their balancing point that they came up with, which you've seen also still continue with a lot of shows today, is that they wanted it to be standalone entry of the week while also having little bits and pieces that would tie into the overarching story, which would really come to define Lost, as I would argue that its overarching story might be the best of any of these network shows. But again, Prison Break, 24, House, Bones, Alien, like you listed, like there are a million other shows like this. But so the big thing is that they assured the network that it would not be as serialized as Alias, and it would be more self-contained. They were lying their asses off. But the ruse convinced the ABC in order to purchase the show. Abrams created the sound and title card, which you guys saw based off of Twilight Zone, very, very heavily inspired, as you're going to see as we get throughout. Famous though, Abrams receives a lot of credit for the show, but what most people don't realize is that he actually withdrew from the production about halfway through the first season in order to be in production on Mission Impossible 3, which was his directorial debut, which left Lindelof and new executive creator Carlton Cuse to finish working on the mythology of the show. Abrams only briefly returned to write the third season premiere with Lindelof before he departed completely. Now, this two-part pilot, and simply titled pilot, was the most expensive pilot in ABC's history at the time, costing between 10 and 14 million. It also came up with other expensive pilots and how much, between 10 and 14 million. World premiere was July 24, 2004 at San Diego Comic-Con 20 years ago. Disney fired Braun before Lost's debut, partly because of low ratings and mostly because he greenlit such an expensive project. Very similar to the one executive that greenlit The Sixth Sense without actually having Disney's approval. And then that guy got fired. But then The Sixth Sense went on to make like $100 million in 1999. And they were like, shit, we screwed up by firing that guy. Almost like we should take more risks at times. Debuted officially on September 20th, 2004, and was such an immediate ratings and critical smash, alongside Desperate Housewives and Grey's Anatomy, both of which premiered at the same time. It helped to rejuvenate ABC's flailing network and likely cause ABC to ignore that JJ and Lindelof had lied their asses off about it not being serialized. So, well, a little bit of a traditional inception for a show. I like how you're seeing like a couple of the similar trappings here along the lines of where, creatives, actually coming up with like a mythology and backstory behind it, not just like kind of throwing ideas at the wall and seeing what stuck. The fact that they really they really wanted the show to be more than just, Survivor meets Lord of the Flies on a desert island. Like the thing that defines Lindelof as a creator is that he has these great ensemble pieces with all of these characters that have all kind of been through this marked tragedy, but they're dealing with it in their different ways. So he's really taking their backgrounds into account. Not to mention the fact that at the time in 2004, this was one of the most diverse casts that had ever been on a TV station before. You've got Korean characters that have like major parts. You've got Black characters that have major parts. Not to mention that, again, the fact of I don't think you have a better narrative device setting up as far as, how do you get a bunch of different people that have all different backgrounds that would probably never communicate with each other in the real world, into this one setting, desert island. And I think it works, honestly. And especially as far as after a certain point, the island itself obviously, again, becomes more of the mainstream once they, start to get into it more. But the biggest thing that I noticed in revisiting this pilot, which I hadn't watched because I hadn't rewatched the show since I started watching it almost 10 years ago when I was in college, the biggest thing that I noticed is that wow, like these characters are actually really interesting and have like different backstories. And like, yeah, there's this air of mystery, but like, I actually want to know them. They feel like real people, not like network TV characters, if that makes sense. I don't know. Did you get that sense?
Yeah, I'm used to watching like modern shows, right? Like everyone's like kind of already kind of, I don't know, developed, I guess. But this is like, okay, completely like blank templates, and we just apply whatever. Of course, in the in this first part pilot, we do get the tiny flashbacks, so to say, of them on the plane. Their individual stories. I'm sure we'll find out more about that and how they interact with each other on the island. I already hate this one guy who kept interrupting the radio
Sawyer,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, like, can he? I'm hoping he dies pretty soon. To be honest.
Oh man. Oh, we are in for a long haul. That's all I'm gonna say there.
But yeah, I'm sure I'm sure I'm gonna grow my favorites over the seasons. I don't know who's gonna be, but I like the core so far.
Indeed. Well, that brings us into casting as well. So most of the first season's roles came from executive producers like various actors. So fun fact, actually, so we're introduced to 14 major name characters that are credited in the main cast, that being Matthew Fox as Jack, Evangeline Lilly as Kate, Jorge Garcia as Hurley, Dominic Monaghan as Charlie, Josh Holloway as Sawyer, Naveen Andrews as Saeed, Emily DeRavin as Claire, Ian Somerhalder as Boone, Maggie Grace as Shannon, Harold Perrineau as Michael, Malcolm David Kelly as Walt, Daniel Day Kim as Jin, Yoonjin Kim as Sun, and Terry O'Quinn as Locke. And also we've got some guest players as well. You have L. Scott Caldwell as Rose, who is the woman that Jack is performing CPR on. Fun fact, actually, Matthew Fox portrays Jack in the pilot. Originally, when they were conceiving it, Michael Keaton was initially supposed to play Jack, who was originally supposed to die in the pilot rather than, it being the actual pilot. In the original, it was conceived that Jack would die and Kate would rise as the new leader of the survivors, originally being conceived as a middle-aged businesswoman whose husband apparently died in the crash, a role that later went to Rose, portrayed by L. Scott Caldwell. Dominic Monaghan and Jorge Garcia both auditioned for Sawyer, who was originally a slick suit-wearing city con man. We will get to that in a little bit. Producers liked Monaghan so much that they changed the role of Charlie to a washed-up rock star to fit him. The role of Hurley was also written for Garcia for the same reason. And then producers like Josh Holloway and the edge that he brought to the role of Sawyer. He reportedly kicked a chair and got visibly angry when he forgot his lines during his audition, along with his southern accent, so they tailored the role of Sawyer to him. Yoonjin Kim auditioned for Kate, but the producers wrote the character of Sun for her, and for Daniel Day Kim's Jin to be her husband. Naveen Andrews Saeed was not in the original script. Locke, portrayed by Terry O'Quinn, and Michael, portrayed by Harold Perrineau, were both written with the actors in mind. Emily DeRavin was cast as Claire in what was supposed to be a recurring role. And finally, Michael Emerson, who does not appear in the first season, but appears in the second season as recurring series antagonist Ben Linus, was contracted to play Ben for 3 episodes, which was later extended to 8, and then a main part for season 3 onward. And then for filming and marketing, the show was shot almost entirely on location in Oahu in Hawaii using Panavision 35mm cameras. But this is what's really interesting here. During its 6 years of broadcasting, Lost would use an extensive collection of promotion tools outside of traditional marketing means, such as alternate reality games, a likely contributor to the show's success since it reached a whole new audience that existed outside traditional marketing, namely being one of the first shows to utilize the emerging online presence, which also contributed to fan theories and online chat forums that would arise during the show's run. And that was really the big impetus, is that Chris would tell me when he was watching Lost as a kid, because they had all the DVDs growing up, that he would go on to like the old online chat forums and website, like early chat forums online, like while this show was running during the mid 2000s. Like this was honestly like the first show, not Sopranos, I would say, because Sopranos was afterward. This was the first show to have like the water cooler, people chatting online after each episode, theorizing what was going on. So yeah, the show, we're talking about television history here, to say the least. It's a big impetus, and a big impact culturally, I would say. So without further ado, you want to start breaking down this pilot, actually see what's going on plot wise?
Very much so.
Yeah. So we open the show, opening shot, Jack waking up in the bamboo forest. Vincent finds him. Vincent the dog, this adorable lab that kind of just like chills around. He wakes up. Famously that iconic opening shot of him opening his eyes. He looks around, runs out of the beach, and it's the middle of a plane wreck. Now, I can only imagine watching this in real time and seeing like what was happening. Like you don't like if you hadn't seen like any promotions or trailers or anything, you turn on this one pilot in September of 2004, and yeah, it's absolute pandemonium. You know, they're on a desert island. There's a plane crash everywhere. You have people running around. It's craziness. It's nonstop. You have guys getting sucked into jet engines. Like, well, like walk me through your thoughts. Like when you first saw like the opening scene.
Well, I've probably seen like general images of what the pilot was. I know the concept of the show. I can assume what the first scenes are going to be. So I thought, okay, this is our main guy. I'm gonna try and remember his name because I'm bad with names.
Yeah, there's a lot of names to remember. You'll remember them as time
I'm
goes
gonna
on.
need a few seasons for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I already like him. He's being like quick and resourceful, like helping people, and yeah, explosions are always nice, especially back then when explosions had some more kick to them than they do now.
Yes.
I feel.
Yes, not as many infinite resources, not as many explosives that they can put out. And also, this is network TV. So the fact that we got, I mean, they said it themselves, this was the most expensive TV pilot in TV history at the time. So they definitely had to use those explosions very, very sparingly.
Although they keep thinking I'm watching Jurassic Park because they also filmed in Hawaii. I'm like,
yes.
Okay, where's the dinosaurs?
Yeah, very,
I don't
very
think there's
similar.
going to be dinosaurs, but like...
Well, I mean, considering how they utilize...
It's one of my plans. It's one of my theories.
Yeah, well, considering how they utilize certain of the creatures that do pop up later on. So we're kind of introduced to some of the other characters as Jack runs out and starts helping people. The order of the main characters as we see them, I was literally keeping note. I'm like, okay, like, when do we see, like, certain characters here? We see Charlie first, Jin, Michael, Shannon, Locke, Claire, Hurley, Boone, Rose. Guy gets sucked into a turbine explosion. Jack reveals that he's a doctor. He helps Boone, who's trying to give Rose CPR. I love how Boone's to be like, I'm a lifeguard. I know how to do CPR. I thought that was hysterical, personally. And I love how, too, again, like, just for me, like when I go back and watch the show and knowing the history of TV and knowing what all these actors would go on to do after the fact, you know, obviously Evangeline Lilly with the Ant-Man movies, Dominic Monaghan had literally just wrapped Lord of the Rings and then went right into the show. Ian Somerhalder for me is still one of the funniest instances as far as being a contribution to the main cast, because obviously for me he's still Damon from the Vampire Diaries. Maggie Grace playing Liam Neeson's daughter in the Taken movies, which I believe she would book right after she left the show. And that's not even getting into some of the other cast members who we haven't even been introduced to yet. But obviously, Daniel Day Kim has been in a lot of things. Harold Perrineau has been in a lot of things TV-wise. Terry O'Quinn. Again, these are TV staples right here. What's it called? So Jack helps Boone give Rose proper CPR. He has Hurley watch over a very pregnant Claire. Which of course it's like, oh man, how do you heighten the stakes and the circumstances even more than they already are? Introduce a pregnant woman on a desert island. What could possibly go wrong there? What's it called? And once the dust is settled, once it seems like everybody has like kind of, you know, gotten to safety after the initial hullabaloo, he goes off into the woods in order to treat a massive scratch that he has on his back. He runs into Kate, asks him to help him sew up the injury. This would be a recurring bit throughout this pilot is you know, people, random civilians having to help Jack perform crazy life-saving surgeries. Jack's also history as a doctor will come into play here. Sawyer watches everything from afar, smoking a cigarette. Saeed has Charlie help him with a fire. Rose kisses her wedding ring. Michael comforts Walt. Jin tells Son to stay by his side and follow everything that he does. You know, little bits right here in order to kind of help establish the ensemble right here. Again, but it's doing what a pilot should do in the sense of where we know who our main guy is and we're getting introduced slowly to our cast. Because again, this is a big cast. This is a lot of cast members. And the good thing is that it's one of those instances where the structure of it, where it's one of those things where the structure of network TV is set up to really, really help this. Help this structure in terms of, you know, you got a lot of characters. You're going to need a lot of time in order to get to know them, at least the main parts. And again, all the multi-parters included, there are 25 episodes in this first season. It is a lot of episodes. This was network TV at its finest. And man, do we get to know every one of these characters and then some.
Yeah, even just like thinking about this as a pilot compared to just as an example of where we are now, like the Disney Plus Marvel shows, where I think every single so-called pilot, they're not pilots, they're just like the first part. Like they're slow, it's just kind of a slog to get through, and at the end you get some kind of reveal type thing. Here it's like, okay, they're on the island. You're already thinking, okay, what are they doing here? Why did the plane crash? Who are these people?
Right.
what is this place? So it's like, okay,
It does
I'm
what
in.
pilots are supposed to do, in the sense of where they are supposed to tell you they are obviously they're supposed to craft a story, but they're not supposed to give you everything within the one pilot. The problem with TV pilots now is, you're right, they're trying to be like just the first 20 minutes of extended movies. So as a result, they're trying to like feed you so much information that you kind of get overloaded and bogged down. Traditional TV is not supposed to work like that. TV is supposed to give you a little inkling, a little taste, And I think this show does it in spades, in the sense of where, again, you get everything that you need to. You're like, okay, this is going to be just, this is a plane crash. It's an island. How would they react in real time to said plane crash? And again, you get it uses the structure of the crash in order to kind of like let you check in with everyone individually. And while you don't need to get to know everybody, you don't know everybody, I would say personally, you don't need to. That's the thing. You get just enough from watching everybody along the way. You get just enough sense of, in order to determine Jin and Sun's relationship, Michael and Walt. You see Locke kind of just sitting off on his own, kind of just contemplating everything. The big focus is obviously within these first two episodes are, I would say, Jack, Kate, and Charlie, at least for the first episode. Then the second episode, the second part, we get more of we get more intrigue on Saeed and Sawyer, and then Boone and Shannon, honestly, and then Hurley as well. So, moving on, what's it called? Hurley offers Claire food. Jack examines the dead U.S. Marshal, or rather not dead, but what's it called? The unconscious, I should say, Marshal, who was sitting next to Kate. He's got a piece of shrapnel impaled in his body, and his head is wrapped, obviously from a concussion of some sort. Jack tells Kate the story about how he almost paralyzed a girl during surgery, and what's it called? Basically, that he only let himself have 5 seconds of fear come in because he accidentally ruined her what's it called? The base of her spine.
Spinal,
Yeah, some sort of like spinal.
And then he locked in.
Yeah, but then he locked in and he got it sewed up. And he worked it out. He may be lying a little bit during that story. That's all I'm gonna say. But he says
I meant to use that strategy. Just like, okay, 5 seconds.
5 seconds, and then boom, lock in. Yo. That's all. Hey, it works. Honestly, from what I've heard, it does work. What's it called? So Jack tells Kate that he blacked out during the crash. Kate says that she saw the whole thing, that she saw the tail end rip off, because that's another big thing that's established that is important for the show, is that when the plane crashes, it splits in half, and the tail end crashes on another end of the island. Jack says that they need to follow the smoke so that they can find the cockpit and potentially find the transceiver that every plane is equipped with in order to send out a signal in order to help the rescue party. Just then, a roaring noise comes from the jungle. Walt wonders if it's Vincent. I don't think that Labradors make a noise. It sounds like that. So, Luke, given that this is your first introduction to what I'm going to call the smoke monster, because while we don't see it in physical form, we hear it. And oh man, it is a big part of what happens here. What did you think? Does that give you any inclinations as far as what could happen?
You say Smoke Monster, I think the second Hunger Games movie. But I thought it was maybe something mechanical initially.
Yes.
I don't know how supernatural the show is going to get, so I don't really want to know that much. So currently, I'm thinking something mechanical.
Yeah,
let's just go with that.
It's very interesting in the sense of how the show mixes like mechanical, technological with more of the supernatural, because you're right in the sense of that it does have a mechanical sound. I think that's what's so interesting about it when they were doing it in the sound design, where I think that they were trying to potentially work around with the ambiguity of it. They weren't sure if they wanted it to actually be real or in the survivors' heads, honestly, which may be the source of the mechanical. It may be like some collective trauma, PTSD, of the crash for the survivors. So I do find it very interesting going back listening to it. I obviously know what it is, and you will see what it is as we go forward. But for now,
I've been reading Stephen King lately, so I have that impacting my thoughts. Like, yes. Is it a freaking Wendigo or something?
Yeah, we don't know. But all I'm gonna say is, like I said, this island has some secrets, to say the least, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. So the next day, Jack and Kate start heading toward the pilot. Charlie volunteers to go with them. Jack tells Boone to keep an eye on if some of the survivors they patched up. On the walk, Charlie tells Kate about his band, Drive Shaft, that he was in, the one-hit wonder. What's it called? Apparently, they were only famous for the one song. We're gonna get more backstory in that, but essentially, Charlie and his brother are in this punk band called Drive Shaft, and they are famous for that one song, "You Are Everybody." A tropical storm starts out of nowhere. Locke stays out in the rain, smiling. Jack, Kate, and Charlie find the cockpit. They climb inside. They find the pilot, played by J.J. Abrams' regular Greg Grunberg, who also portrays the mind-reading guy in Heroes. He's been in a million other things. He was in Star Trek and the most recent Star Wars movies. The pilot tells them that, unfortunately, the radio went out. So they tried to reroute to Fiji, but they hit turbulence and went 1,000 miles off course, meaning that right now the rescue party is looking for them in the wrong place. He shows them the transceiver on the seat next to him. Just then, the monster arrives and sucks the pilot out of the cockpit.
And I kept rewinding. It's like, okay, do we get a glimpse at it? No.
But there's too much shaky cam in order to cover up for the fact that they basically just have like the pilot on a wire that's being sucked out. Yep, he's gone. It's like, so much for getting used to the pilot. I believe that in the original script, they initially had Jack getting dragged out as well, but obviously they changed that. What's it called? A brief flashback shows Jack on the plane moments before the crash. He's trying to comfort Rose since she doesn't do well with flying. Charlie runs past them. What's it called? Back in the present, Jack, Kate, and Charlie run from whatever the monster is. Charlie trips. Jack goes back for him. Kate hides in a tree. She uses Jack's counting technique to calm down. Charlie finds her. They go back looking for him. They find Jack underneath the pilot, whose body is sprawled, tangled up in some trees, dead. End of part 1. So already, before we even get into part 2, this is setting us up for some intrigue. We're set up that, this island is not your typical island. The plane, when it crashed, it's 1,000 miles off course. The rescue party doesn't know where we are. The transceiver, we don't even know if it works. And so as of right now, they're like, this is setting up. We are on our own up against whatever the hell is on this island. So already, Luke, your brain is theorizing. You're trying to figure out like what the hell is going on, And I think that again is kind of the modus operandi, and it's kind of how they stumbled onto Gold, which is where they're like, okay, if we can keep the audience guessing and theorizing throughout this whole thing, they're gonna be intrigued. And it's both the best thing and the worst thing about the show, in the sense of where, yes, I am always constantly intrigued and I want to know what's going on. And even going back and rewatching stuff, knowing what's going to happen, there's so much interest and pathos and depth with the characters. My only gripe is I wish that they had made that more of the front and center. They did for the first couple seasons, and I thought they did a really good job with balancing it out. But as the show got on and the show became much more so plot focused, once it kind of moved past like getting to know the characters, that's kind of when it started to get a little irritating, in the sense of where, like we have more and more mysteries upon mysteries upon mysteries. And after a certain point, it's like, you're just jerking us around, And unfortunately, it's a technique that certain other shows would run with to a point where it would get like irritating, namely The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead would be notorious for trying to keep people on the limb just in order to keep them coming back and watching. So, I mean, what are your thoughts, Luke, on TV shows using that as a strategy?
So, like just the mystery aspect of things. Maybe like the closest thing that I've watched is The 100. Have you seen that?
I have not, no. But I've heard that The 100 is another show that's very heavily influenced by Lost.
I could see that. I've never actually watched the last season. I've tried to attempt a few times. Basically, it's nuclear war has happened. Humans live in a space station, and they send down 100 teenagers to see if the Earth is survivable.
Teenagers.
It's a YA thing. It's a YA thing. So, and there that every season there's a new mystery. And it works. There's character conflict, so I guess that's the closest thing to it, and it definitely keeps the audience guessing and watching until the show eventually runs out of steam. Because that show, it went a bit crazy, and I kind of tapped out. This one we'll see. It's only the first episode we're discussing now, and then part 2, obviously. If you can keep me watching, that's good enough.
Yeah.
I'll bow out when I bow out. I'm not going to bow out of this one because I've committed to however long we're going to do this. But
basically, my interest for this show, going back and rewatching it, is the characters, because they are well written. They are all interesting enough. They all have their collective individual backstories. And the other thing too, also that Lindelof loves playing around with specifically is trauma, and the idea that all these characters, like every character and everything that he's ever done, are traumatized in some way. And this island is essentially, I mean, you get into both into the practical and the metaphysical elements of it. They are revealed to have like some supernatural elements as well. There's a secret about Locke that's revealed in his solo episode that you get, in a couple of episodes. Rose as well reveals that like she feels that the island has healed her in some way. So they do get into some elements as well. The structure around each episode, you don't really get that as much in the pilot, but basically the structure, at least for the first 3 seasons, is each episode you get a flashback on an individual character, as they're, on an individual character and kind of the events that led them to getting on the plane. Oceanic Flight, I think it's like 616, I want to say, is the name of the flight. I could be wrong. I could just be still in the Marvel mentality there. But yeah, so that's kind of the focus of the show, honestly, going forward. It's when you get into more of the supernatural elements on the island. Yeah, that stuff is fun, but that's not necessarily like kind of the reason for why I started watching the show. So I'm going to be interested to see how that measures up as we get away from the character building. So going into part 2, Jack, Kate, and Charlie walk back to the beach. Charlie asks about the transceiver. Flashback shows Charlie running to the bathroom in order to do heroin at the time of the crash. Shannon, I have in parentheses useless, talks with Claire on the beach, considering that Shannon is probably the most useless character and probably the worst character of the batch for this entire first 2-season run, literally to the point where her own brother is calling her out on it. Consider the fact that she is just suntanning and has been doing nothing but complaining while everybody else has been going around trying to help fix everything and survive. Michael looks for Walt, who's looking for Vincent, runs into Jin and Sun. Already some animosity being established here between these guys. Walt discovers some handcuffs on the beach. Jack and the others come back. They bring up a fight going on between Saeed and Sawyer. Sawyer accuses Saeed of having crashed the plane. Some good old mid-2000s post-9/11 racism going on right there. Love it. Love to see it. Saeed starts working on the transceiver. Hurley comes up, starts talking to him, tells him that he fought for the Republican Guard in the Gulf War. Again, another little bit of like sprinkling in some character bits. The fact that the establishes like, yes, I'm a veteran, I'm a soldier, so Hurley naturally assumes, oh, cool, you were on our side, right? And Saeed's like, yeah, maybe not, maybe not. But again, showing that like he kind of gives Hurley this look as like, oh, ask me more about it, please. Ask me what I did during the war, and we're gonna get into that again. Just love this stuff. Love
again,
like the little sprinklings.
How do you get all these various people in this one location?
Exactly. Exactly, because they did establish that this flight was flying from Australia back to California when it crashed. So Kate bathes in the ocean. Sun tries to talk to her, but of course, as of right now, Sun and Jin both only speak Korean, although Sun does secretly know how to speak English, but that is not revealed yet. Saeed tells Kate that he's got the transceiver working, but they're not getting a signal and that they need to get to higher ground. Kate tells Jack, who is against the idea after their encounters with the monster and the pilot. But Kate tells him that they have to try. Jin offers handmade food that he was working on, collecting fish to Hurley, who refuses. Michael tries to comfort Walt over the missing Vincent. Jack asks Hurley to look for drugs in order to help fix the injured Marshall. Charlie starts to go through withdrawal. Boone tells Shannon that she's being useless. Angry Shannon volunteers to go with Kate, Saeed, and Charlie up the mountain, try and get a signal. Boone goes with them. Sawyer watches from afar and then decides to join. Jack tells Michael that he saw Vincent in the jungle the other day. Walt runs into Locke, who tells him...
Will we see the dog again?
We will see the dog again.
Okay,
yes,
good.
I can promise that we will see the dog again. We will see adorable Vincent again.
What a name for a dog, Vincent.
It's a great name, Vincent. What's it called? I wonder if they ever get into the backstory of how he was named there.
I mean, after Vincent Chase, perhaps?
Oh, man. Well, this did premiere the same year as Entourage, so there is that. Oh, man. What's it called? Walt runs into Locke, who tells him the history of backgammon. Walt tells him that he grew up in Australia with his mom, who just recently passed away. And Locke is telling him, oh, man, you've had a hard run of things. Already setting up Locke as kind of this, like, mysterious, like, ancillary force, ultimately. What do you think of Locke so far? What's your thoughts on him?
I'm slow. As you read through this, I'm trying to...
Remember which guy is this?
Okay, he did that. So that's Locke. Okay.
Yes.
Locke does seem a bit mysterious. He was just kind of sitting in the rain for that bit. We don't know what he's going to tell him, that you want to know a secret, and then he cuts away. I guess
yes.
We'll find out eventually what that is. But yeah, I'm just trying to piece together who am I interested in most through these first 2 episodes.
Yes,
Locke is definitely one of them.
Yeah, Locke obviously would emerge as a fan favorite character as the show goes on. Right now, again, I'm just being reminded of all my favorites. Saeed is one of my favorites. Hurley is one of my favorites. Charlie, tragic character, as you see, one of my favorites. Even Sawyer, where I keep forgetting how much of an that Sawyer is that classic case of like he's such an asshole in those first 2 episodes, but as you learn more about him and his backstory as time goes on, it does end up becoming one of my favorites. Jin and Sun, obviously, I forget how like kind of ancillary and separated they are from everybody else. Man, just like some of the staples of the first couple seasons that, man, I just miss them. I really, really do. What's it called? Continuing on. Jin offers his food to Claire, who was saying earlier that she couldn't feel the baby kicking after they crashed. Claire accepts, and after she eats the food, she feels the baby kick, and in a quite funny moment, grabs Jin's hand and forces him to feel the baby kick, which I thought that was pretty great, especially given just how uncomfortable he looked there. In the forest, Saeed and Sawyer are arguing once again about whether the transceiver will work, and their loud noises attracts something. They think it's the monster again. It charges toward them. They go to run away. Sawyer pulls a gun out of nowhere and starts shooting at it and kills it. It's revealed to be a polar bear in the middle of a tropical island in somewhere presumably around Fiji in the southeast hemisphere of the entire planet. And they're like, okay, what's a polar bear doing on this tropical island? This doesn't really match up.
That's like one of the other spoiler things that I knew, that they're polar bears at some point. And this early, okay, this is already like a big thing that gets the viewers asking, okay, what the hell is a polar bear doing in Arlington, Texas?
I will say that as far as some of the bigger overarching mysteries that are set up, the polar bear unfortunately does not kind of end up being one of them. It just ends up being like, oh, it's a polar bear on a tropical island.
At least it's something. Cool.
It's something, it's something in order to keep you intrigued. I mean, there are more polar bears that do come back ultimately, but and they do reveal how they get there and like the very, very, very end, as far as more the spooky mumbo jumbo, timey-wimey, space-time things. But what's it called? Back on the beach, Jack performs surgery on the Marshal with Hurley's help. Hurley passes out from there being too much blood. In the jungle, the group argues over the polar bear. Kate asks Sawyer where he got the gun from. Sawyer says it was from the Marshal. Saeed theorizes that he was the Marshal prisoner. Kate takes the gun, dismantles it with Saeed's help. Flashback reveals that it was actually Kate who was the Marshal's prisoner. You will see why that is once we get into her flashback episode, which I believe is either the next episode, it'll be at some point. The Marshal wakes up while Jack is performing surgery. He asks where Kate is. The group makes it to the mountaintop, and this is where we get the big setup for the rest of the season and the show. They receive a signal, but basically it's revealed that, what's it called? Saeed can't send out a signal because they are receiving a signal from somebody else on the island who is transmitting, and it's a message in French. They have Shannon decipher it, and they basically discover that it is a message that has been on a loop for 16 straight years of a French woman pleading in French for someone to come and save them. Obviously this is revealed to be the character of Danielle Russo, who we will meet at a later on at a certain point. So a couple things that are established here with this ending message. One, these survivors are not the only ones on the island. Two, there are people who've been stranded on this island for 16 years, which raises question number 3, where the hell is this island located? So already we cut to black and we are set up for a lot of mysteries, some of which will be answered by the end of this first season, some of which will be answered over the course of the entire show. But Luke, so with that being said, man, where do you think we are? What were your thoughts as far as like what's going on at the end once that mic drop moment happened?
Well, for me, I think the first question is when we are rather than where. But where we are, there's really no telling. It's a desert island. The polar bears, we just need to keep watching. I'm not saying like, okay, I need to go watch the whole season right now. We're gonna take our time with it. But yeah, I'm fully in. The 16 years thing, especially is intriguing. Of course, it'd be pretty boring if it was just them on the island. Just like, I have my theories. I'm sure you will enjoy my various theories as we venture through the show, just knowing what happens. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to explore.
It's going to be great, especially given that, obviously you are a first-time viewer of the show. We've heard all of us talk about the show before, but obviously, we have, I have watched the show, Chris has watched the show, Agnolo has watched the show. So, a couple of other of our friends within the YouTube space have all watched the show. So it's going to be interesting going forward, seeing how, kind of your reaction to it specifically. A couple of other points that I wanted to talk about as well. Basically, mid-2000s TV, obviously, cable dominating both the ratings and the Emmys, and network TV was struggling. Reality, the big thing obviously was the fact that how heavily influenced this was by reality TV as well, given, Survivor had already been one of the biggest things that people were watching at the time, and how that was such a heavy influence, specifically on the location wise. What's it called? My point, I guess, my thesis statement that I'm trying to start with this one, which was similar to what I did with Talkin Thrones. Talkin Thrones, the goal was we wanted to figure out kind of what went wrong with the show ultimately, how the show was the biggest thing on TV for 10 straight years, and then for those brief couple years after the 8th season, it felt like the show would just vanish completely before it kind of crept back into the pop culture sphere with House of the Dragon. Lost is a little bit of a different beast in the sense of where this was arguably like that not only had such an impact on TV in general, but also the impact on the culture, especially given that unlike Game of Thrones, which was a pretty big IP, Lost is an original concept. So the fact that an original concept has this big of an impact on the culture base, we really hadn't seen anything like this really since Star Wars, obviously, because Star Wars also obviously is an original idea, not based on any pre-existing IP. So
Dune.
Kind of,
it's based on Dune.
Okay, if you want to go that far. Well, if you want to go that far, it's also a Hidden Fortress as well from Kurosawa, so it's kind of a mix of the two. But basically,
I have to get my Dune propaganda.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Especially because I finally also, I don't know if you can see my bookshelf back there.
I just love that.
Yeah, I just recently got Dune Messiah, so that will be one of my next reads. But the biggest thing that we're trying to figure out is how Lost ended up being the most important show in the transition from cable to streaming, how it taught certain TV showrunners and producers going forward what to do and what not to do, possibly how it also contributed to shorter episode counts going forward, as you will see. Lost midway through its run also had to deal with the late 2000s writer's strike. We just honestly, suffered through the most recent writer's strike, but Lost was heavily impacted by the writer's strike. And what you saw was it drastically decreased the amount of episodes going from the first 3 seasons to the later 3 seasons. The first 3 seasons had about 22 to 23 episode run counts. The last 3 seasons only had about 14 to 17 episode run counts, and about half of those were multi-part episodes. And also, what's it called? And also, like I said, how it covered like that transition period in TV, which I would argue is the most important transition period in TV, that mid-2000s to late 2000s, because only a couple years after Lost premieres, you get Breaking Bad and Mad Men when cable kind of resumes dominance. And then a few years later, you have Netflix, and we're basically, you have the premiere of Game of Thrones, which is Game of Thrones premieres 1 year after Lost ends, and then 1 year later, you have Netflix really starting to make an impact with streaming. So that's kind of what we're seeking to accomplish with the show, is we're going to see how Lost covers the gamut as far as all of that goes. So before we get out of here, Luke, I want to get at least one theory from you as far as what could happen in not only the next episode or the next show per episode. So after finishing up this 2-part pilot, what is your one theory that you have going forward? It could be about a character. It could be about the island itself. What is your one theory?
Okay. All I know is there's some kind of bunker, but not to go too specific. I'm going to say that it's a government facility experiment type thing that's on the island. That's pretty basic, but I'm just going to roll with that as my primary theory for now.
It'll get more intriguing as time goes on, to say the least. I will neither confirm nor deny that. So that's it, people. That is our recap of the pilot of the premiere of our Lost recap show, Talkin Lost. So just to give you guys a bit of housekeeping info, this will be the primary podcast on Sundays going forward. There'll be a couple of bonus movie podcasts as well throughout the rest of the year, but for the most part, this is it. This is what we're going to be focusing on right now. We're going to be recapping every episode of Lost. So either you're with it or you're not, ultimately. I will be the first person to admit that this summer kind of was very much a letdown as far as recapping movies. So I'm personally taking a little bit of a step back away from it. I need it, but there will be more content coming out on the channel. Of course, our Talkin TVs will be available next weekend, in 2 weeks. It will be up right before the Emmys air. Also, I'm still currently hard at work on the behind the scenes of Project 99, but that will begin airing relatively soon. And then you're also going to want to keep an eye out for our Oscars Watch miniseries, where we're going to be breaking down all of the pending fall movies and seeing what Oscars they are going to qualify for as we get ready for the end of 2024. 4th. There's going to be some surprises on there. There's going to be some different choices on there, to say the least. There's also going to be some more bonus episodes as well. So definitely you guys are going to want to stay tuned as we continue on with this shift from the summer into the fall. Luke, thank you once again for joining me. Like I said, this is going to be a massive, massive journey that we're going to be on, but I'm very, very excited to have you on it with me. So thank you once again for joining me. Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Oh, thank you for having me. I just hope that we do Gilmore Girls 30 years in 2030. I could lead that one.
Oh, I bet you could. I bet you could.
Maybe I think that one has more episodes than Lost.
I'm pretty sure it does. That's like a old school cable show.
But you can find me. Well, probably here mostly is going to be my primary creative output with starting my masters. It's gonna be a good one. So otherwise, look reviews on YouTube. You can find my annual 3 videos on there. But I will do my top 10 movies of the year.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yes, you have to. I loved your top 10 from last year. That was a great video. And of course, you guys can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin TV Podcast across all platforms. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitch. This episode will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts on Tuesday for the holiday, in order to account for the holiday weekend. But with all that being said, people, 12 seasons and a short film, and watch more fucking movies, and in this case, more Lost. We'll see you guys next week covering episode 3 of Talkin Lost, Tabula Rasa.